Hello, people. So, just starting this live stream. Um, as always, it depends on the feedback. So, hopefully, it'll be like last time. I've tried to give you advance notice, so hopefully that was enough time. And hopefully, we'll have a bit of interaction going on here. So, wait a few minutes, and if there's no feedback, then have to make a decision on whether to continue or not. I can talk to you, Chris, while I'm waiting here. My friend's just here. He's doing something in the background. So, like I say, people, if you're online, please do leave a comment so that I know you're here. We need to get communication going. I thought the last live stream was very good. One person online, so you say something. Some of you may have seen a video where I was addressing a subscriber who had taken issue with my approach to ratings. So I do hope that person makes an appearance. Hey, so Tomu Cow, Declan Marsh. Hey guys. What I'm going to do is wait a few minutes and someone could get a question or bring up a topic, absolutely anything. My friend is here today, so he's busy doing something, but maybe make this live stream a little bit shorter than before. But hopefully we'll get a good dialogue going. How are you guys? Hello, Alistair Burns. Welcome. So what I'm going to do, guys, is wait a few minutes. The way this gets flowing really is if someone asks a question. Okay, so here we go. Did you see the vile hooliganism? I wouldn't care if they banned us from international football forever. I haven't watched the news today. From what I gather, there was a few incidents. There was people who barged into Wembley before the game, and they didn't have tickets. I saw that incident, and I saw some of the vandalism of the poster with Marcus Rashford. I didn't know about trouble after the match, so if there was, it wouldn't surprise me, unfortunately. I actually have an Italian friend. Um, I think she's got British citizenship now, so she obviously had divided loyalties. She was very pleased her side won, but lived here for years. And she actually done a video. She was walking around Bournemouth town centre, and it looked like a little bit of noisiness, but I didn't see any trouble. Um, I was disappointed that I missed most of the last one. Yeah, that's okay, Alistair. I mean, I'm going to do these quite regularly, so if you do miss one of these live streams, there'll always be more. It was exaggerated. Declan, heard there was a fair bit of racist attacks from thugs in football last night. Do you mean actual physical attacks? I heard about online abuse, but I didn't know about any physical attacks. But sadly, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me because unfortunately, I was talking to a friend yesterday, and he was saying, an English friend, and he was saying that it's kind of anticipated that there will be trouble. There's one thing to say about this. I mean, I've always had a hardline view on hooliganism, and I do think this country has a problem. But it has to be said, we're not unique. North Africa, it's a really big issue. Morocco, Algeria, Egypt, and Italy itself, they had a poster insulting our monarch. And apparently, two people died last night. One guy died in a road accident, and apparently, a mobster actually used the crowd to take out a rival. So there was certainly trouble over there. But it's always one of these things that it's what perspective do you look at? I mean, I think we've got a problem and I think we need to take it seriously. On the other hand, we can't generalize, and most fans were probably reasonable. Um, but like you say, Tomu, no endless videos of fights, racism, England fans fighting each other for no reason. I did see the two bin men. Don't know if you guys saw that. I forget where it was, but they were laying into one another and they'd been drinking all day, and they even turned on members of the public. Can't remember which town that was in, but actually, if it was Liverpool City Centre, could be wrong about that. Um, Declan, I had my jab Saturday morning. No side effects after it. Yes, a lot of it's pathetic and scummy all over football. I had Moderna myself. I had a little bit of pain afterwards and due my second jab in August. Omu, I was in Brighton. I personally saw racist intimidation and mob throwing stuff at seagulls. Oh, shitbags. Were there police around? Was there any arrests or? Yeah, it's just frankly some degenerates in this country who I don't know. I think football's improved a lot over the years, but I think that unfortunately with some of these people, it seems that there's very little deterrent. I think personally, for the more serious abuse, physical attacks and that sort of thing, it's not good enough to just ban them from 2 or 3 matches. I think they should be given. I think in the most extreme cases, they should be given a lifetime ban. On the other hand, then they could take out their issues in a. Because often with football, the trouble isn't in the stadium itself, but in pubs, in city centres, and so on. Yeah, it's in the 70s, of course, it was called the English disease. And Scotland also had their share of problems. So the British disease. But like I say, we're certainly not unique. Russia, Ukraine, Balkan countries, they all have their issues. The videos of fights were between people trying to break into the stadium and actual ticket holders. Yeah, I guess the ticket holders would feel resentful that they done the right thing. They got their tickets. Barely a police presence for some reason. I saw some security personnel trying to prevent it, but it seemed like a very futile effort. I mean, I do think because of the scale of the event, I don't know what the capacity was. I know Wembley can hold 90,000 people. I know at the England Denmark match there was 67,000, so maybe it wasn't full capacity. Um, but certainly for an event that size, there needs to be a sizable police presence. You would even get that at a derby fixture, like Newcastle Sunderland or Liverpool Everton. So certainly for a UEFA Cup final, you'd think it would be like an army of police. I think it would be justified if there was, given the history of trouble. I mean, during the England Denmark match, apparently someone was shining a laser at the Danish keeper's face. So people would think that's banter, but it could damage the guy's eyesight. Those things can be quite powerful. Apparently, the England side got fined, but I'm not sure if that's the right approach because fining the England team won't necessarily stop the Yobs. I think it's better to penalise them. I mean, it would put pressure on the team, on the FA to do something about it, but I also think people are responsible for their own actions. Sakar, good day. Glad to see you doing this again so soon. How was your weekend? Thank you. It was quite good. Um, I've been a bit overwhelmed recently, just doing a lot of things. I'm going to the gym again. I've taken on new students. I do tutorial lessons online. I'm reading newspapers and trying to get through them because football, there's a lot of coverage of that. So I'm good, but a little bit overwhelmed if I'm being honest. I need to slow down the pace of things a bit. Bloodfire of London, noise. Don't know what that means. Noice. Bloodfire of London, welcome. Haven't seen you before. So, what do you mean by noise? How are you, Zach? Did you have a good weekend? By the way, any non-Europeans here? Zach, I think you're from the States. I don't know how Americans perceive our. Oh, sorry, Bloodfire. Nice, thank you. Um, yeah, I mean, there's American football, of course, which is a totally different sport. But I know that soccer, as our American cousins would say, is getting more popular over there. So I don't know if there's a big interest in the States in European football. But certainly it's huge on this continent. I'm still find it debatable where to lift all restrictions on July the 19th. I don't know if you saw my video, Declan. Really want normality, but concerned over cases shooting up over 30,000 cases per day and bear the thought of having another lockdown. Yeah, this is something, that is going to polarize opinion. I saw an article last night where someone described it as Johnson's Falklands moment. In other words, this pivotal decision he has to make because he's facing huge pressure from the science faction and medical advisors, but then there's also probably the Chancellor and other ministers. I mean, Grant Shapps was talking about, Transport Secretary was talking about being okay with masks and continuing on buses and trains. I personally think if we justify more and more lockdowns every time there's a new variant, we're never going to get out of this thing. I know I've long abided by the rules. I accept the rules are there for a reason, but at this point, I do think it has to end because I'm concerned about the mental health implications. I'm concerned, frankly, about social disorder the longer this goes on. Um, do I consider it Johnson's fault that the Indian variant spread? Um, I don't think so. No, I mean, I think there's areas the government can be blamed on. Probably very early in the pandemic, they were told to bring in the initial lockdown. Johnson was a bit cavalier in his attitude early on, and no doubt there'll be debate over and criticism of the mixed messages and the very flawed apps. Apparently, people are deleting the NHS app that tells them to self isolate, even if they've been jabbed twice and have tested negative for the virus. So I think there'll be plenty of ground to criticise the government, but I don't think Johnson could be. Well, I mean, some say we should have stopped all flights from India. I don't know. Um, it's difficult to say. I mean, this is an unprecedented event, and even governments that were praised for handling it well are now facing challenges, like Australia. So I'm reluctant to be too critical of the government on the grounds that I think whoever was in power was is going to face issues. And to be honest, I mean, look at Florida, for example. There's been a different approach there to California, but apparently it hasn't. I mean, I'd need to check the data on this, but apparently Florida's more laid back approach hasn't made a difference to the number of cases. I don't know, but there's now this thing going on in the US where different states are having very different approaches. Um, so yeah, football is obviously the major issue. I don't know if you guys saw my video addressed to a person called Pigman Pig. Okay, I've got a few more comments here. Paul, I'm sure they will try and lock us down again this autumn, but this time we must stand up and say no more. It's madness. Yeah, I think there's going to be social disorder if this continues. I mean, I do understand the need for lockdowns initially, and but I think at this point there's no legal or moral ground when most of the country now has been vaccinated. I think it must be well over or around the two-thirds mark. So I think at this point, um, yeah, I do think we definitely need to get out of this. And I think personally, the first thing that needs to go is the damn masks. I can't stand them. I wear mine, I obey the rules, but I really don't like them. I find them uncomfortable. I don't know how everyone else feels. I have the Velcro one. Some people have the visor type thing, and some people have medical exemptions. And I feel sorry for those people because they're not always understood. Some people think they're just being stubborn, but they might well have a legitimate reason. They might be a rape survivor. They might be. They might have severe asthma and other issues. Alistair, I understand the government should be afforded a bit of leeway considering the novelty of the pandemic. So I wouldn't criticise the government for around PPE and the initial lockdown. However, um, Zakar, not to change the topic too abruptly, but this weekend I was able to try LSD for the first time in several years. It was a delight. How do you feel about hallucinogenics? So I'll come back to that question because I do have views on drugs. Paul Armstrong, is this merely training for future climate lockdown, ETC? Wouldn't put past the globalist climate cultists to try it. I have to be honest, Paul, I don't agree with you. I think climate change is a very real issue. I mean, 49 degrees in British Columbia is not normal for Canada. It's just not. So, yeah, I can't agree with you on that one. Alistair, keeping the Indian border open was so blatantly stupid, and everyone saw the disaster happening before the border was closed. Now we are the only country in Western Europe with prevalent COVID. Yeah, definitely that could have been regarded as a major mistake. All the vaccine boasting Johnson is doing is meaningless because this overwhelming harm done by the Indian variant spreading. Well, here's a question about the Indian variant. What's the actual mortality of it? I know that cases are going up, but what's the actual mortality rate? Because the last time I saw the daily COVID figures, I think it was 33 deaths. Now, when you look at the height of the pandemic last year, we were having 800, 900 deaths a day. So my question about the Indian variant is how powerful is it? I mean, what's the mortality rate? I don't know. Does anyone know the answer to that? Zach, I'll come back to your question. I don't mind subjects fluctuating like that because it's good to have diversity of subjects. I don't know where you are, but LSD is very illegal in the UK. And personally, I wouldn't touch that shit. I don't know what experience you got, but no, honestly, anything over, frankly, tobacco, alcohol, and maybe marijuana scares me. Because I think that you might get higher, you might feel great, but I'd be worried about the addictive side. I'd be worried about, well, certainly the legalities. I mean, if you're in the States, I'm sure it's illegal there. So were you not concerned about that? And if you want to divulge the information, I mean, did you did you know someone to get it from or what? Personally, I wouldn't try it. I mean, I'm not judging you, but I wouldn't do it myself. Listen to your uncle Nathan. Stay off the yeah, stay off the LSD, kids. I do concur with that. I mean, I don't want to sound holier than thou, Zach, but really, mate, I would be careful with that. Where are you, Zach? Are you in the States? I'm being presumptive there because Zach's quite an American name. We don't really have many Zachs over here. So, yeah, does anyone know the answer to that? What is the actual mortality rate of Declan? As a believer, I really enjoyed going to my local church on Sunday since April. It's a Hillsong church and very different to conventional Christian churches. Very uplifting and laid back and lively. So we have a new subject there. Um, what did I think of the Russian Navy dispute? We have a few new subjects here. Um, even weed gives me very bad side effects for mental health, anxiety, negative obsessive thought patterns. I barely use it nowadays. Okay, guys, we have a few subjects here, so let's just stick to those for now. Otherwise, I'll get too cluttered. Tomu, that's an interesting thing to say because often when I hear about marijuana, it's people trying to promote it. So you're saying you've used it and you had negative side effects. One thing I heard about marijuana was it can be a contributing factor to schizophrenia. So I don't know what the science is on that. I did use it once, but to be honest, it had no effect on me. It didn't. I didn't see this like high that people talk about. Maybe I was smoking it wrong. Maybe I was doing something wrong. I just to me it was just like a weak tobacco. It wasn't. I just didn't get anything from it because I used to smoke like tobacco, and I just thought it was a bit overrated. I just didn't see the appeal with it. But then again, I don't know what I was using necessarily. If it was maybe it wasn't the pure marijuana. Certainly, I know in the States, the legalities is about 50-50, depending on the state. In Britain, it's still illegal, but probably if there was one drug to be legalized, it would probably be marijuana. Um, Declan, I'll come back to your point. Alistair, what do I make of the Russian Navy dispute? Well, I spoke to my dad about this. He had an interesting view, which was that maybe technically we were being provocative. We were testing Russia's boundaries. And I think the official line from the Navy was a good old bit of kind of propaganda. Having said that, it goes without saying I'm very critical of the Russian government. They illegally annexed Ukraine, or rather Crimea, in 2014, and that really is the bottom line. So Russia really doesn't have a moral argument on that. Um, I think it is what it is. I think the Navy was testing Russia's resolve. And of course, they're not going to officially say that. Russia does the same thing with us. I mean, they sometimes make appearances in the North Sea, getting pretty close to our maritime territory. So it's good old, geopolitical games. I think realistically there wasn't going to be any casualties, but I did notice that the sailors put on the fire resistant material. So that could have been a major international incident. Should we have done it? Well, I mean, I think morally, I don't think there's any problem because it's still international water. Very few states recognize Russia's claims there. They illegally annexed Crimea. On the other hand, if we're being honest, it was a provocative move in that sense to test Russia's resolve. Um, Carl, did you hear about Richard Branson going to space? Yes, actually, I might post about that on my Facebook timeline because it's a bit of good news, in the sense of a great British entrepreneurial success story. I guess good news from last night, bad news from the football. So yeah, I watched that. I didn't quite get the science of it. I think he's broken the hydrosphere or something like that. Some were critical. They said it's just a billionaire's, joyride. But I'd be a bit less cynical. I thought I like Branson. Frankly, I think I like the fact he's always coming up with new ideas, and I think he's an interesting guy. Paul Branson never went to space. Not even sure it was lower Earth orbit. So what exactly did he do? It must have been. I mean, it was newsworthy, so there must have been some barrier he broke or something. Um, doesn't matter if we don't recognize the water. Reality is the Crimea's waters are very much Russian. Yeah, but the thing is, Alistair, that's de facto. It is Russian control, but it's not just Britain and the West. There is Russia has very little international recognition of that annexation. It's not just a dispute between Britain and Russia. It's not I mean, it's de facto. It's in Russian control, but it's. I honestly see it as similar to Hitler annexing the Sudetenland on the ground to protecting German speakers. Putin justified it on the ground to protecting Russian speakers, but that doesn't make it right. Alistair, 50 years time, Virgin Atlantic may be something we can all enjoy. Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, at the moment, these are billionaire sort of experiments. The vast majority of ordinary people can't afford to go to space or go down to the Titanic. But there's also exhibitions on the submersible good to go to the Titanic. Um, Liana, are you around? Last time we had a Romanian visitor, Liana. I'm just wondering, is she here? Because I like to have diversity in my subscribers. So it's I mean, you guys are all welcome, but any female viewers, subscribers, please do feel free to leave your comments as well. And going back a little bit, Declan, you mentioned church, so we could talk about that if you want. As a believer, I really enjoy going to my local church on Sundays since April. Do you mean you're a believer now or in the past context? It's a Hillsong church. What exactly does that mean? Would you mean more evangelical, or I'm not quite sure what that means, a Hillsong church? And very different to conventional Christian churches, very uplifting and laid back and lively. Yeah, it sounds like it's kind of evangelical or gospel style. I've been to a few things like that, and you're right, it's very lively. Not entirely my cup of tea. I find it a little bit dogmatic, a little bit. I mean, I've always found, I knew an American guy when I was in China, Texan, and he was very much of that school of faith, quite evangelical. He was very friendly, nice young family, but to me, that intensity of belief is a little bit, I don't know, makes me a little bit uneasy, to be honest, because it's like such an absolute certainty. And whilst, all practicing Christians will believe it is a different level. I mean, I've experienced all sorts of church denominations. I've been in, I mean, my dad is actually Episcopalian minister. Um, So I come from a Christian background. I've been in Anglican churches. I've been in the Dutch Lutheran Church. The only one I haven't been in is Eastern Orthodox. Been in Catholic churches, but I've never been to Eastern Orthodox, and they're really they're pretty conservative on social issues. Um, guys, like I said, my friend is here. What I'll do is maybe not make this one too long today because I mean he's going on with something, but I don't want to keep him waiting too long. So. I'll give him maybe another, let's say, I'll go up to 35 minutes. So any more questions, any more issues anyone wants to raise, just leave the comment. I'll try and cover as much as I can. There was a guy called Pigman Pig, and he was very critical of me in a few videos back. Some people might have seen that. Well, I gave him an opportunity to come to this live stream, to justify what he was saying, and he hasn't shown up. So it's there for the record. Alistair, what do you make of the increasing prevalence of autism and ADHD? Well, I guess that's the question of how it's defined. I mean, I would be sympathetic, but I also think that we need to be sure that all these cases really are autism and they're not being misdiagnosed. There could be something else. I mean, I've an autistic friend. Rather, he has Asperger's, which, as I understand, is a form of autism. In fact, I know a few people with it, so it's relatively common. I don't know what the numbers are in the UK, um, but in terms of what's ADHD, what's that acronym stand for? Is that a form of autism, or is that autism, Chris?
It's no, it's not really autism. No, it's when you demand attention quite a lot.
So it's a totally
Different.
my friend's just explaining to me that it's a totally different. Yeah, well, with ADHD again, there might be underlying behavioral issues there that aren't necessarily. I mean, we diagnose a lot of things, and sometimes there might be cases of something being misdiagnosed or overdiagnosed. Um, so that's a whole. That would probably require a whole video, but I don't have the expertise in it, so I can't comment too much. Um, Carl, do you think that Virgin Galactic will become more affordable in the next few years, or will it take a lot longer? I don't think the next few years. I do think it will take longer. At the moment, it's like a billionaire sort of, maybe millionaires can get there, but yeah, it's definitely for commercial availability. I think probably decades, to be honest. I mean, remember, let's say even as late as the 1970s, the average British foreign holiday was to Spain. Now we can go to, like, leaving aside the pandemic, we could go to Thailand, we can go to Mexico, so that spectrum of travel does change over time. 100 years ago, a family holiday would have been a week to Blackpool or Brighton, away from the industrial cities, London, Liverpool, and so on. So it does change over time, and I do think within the century, that sort of thing will become more commercially available. So, there could be exciting times ahead. Um, Declan, not gospel, evangelical. It's very contemporary. Been a believer for a long time. Have you ever thought about doing countdown music before your live stream? To be honest, I'm not sure how to do it. I think if I'd done music, would I not need to get copyright permission from the artist? And that might be, it might be a lot of paperwork, and I don't know. I mean, it's a good idea, but I'd imagine there's some legalities around that in terms of the copyright. Alistair, I'm 19, and a good number of people from my age are getting diagnoses for autism who really don't seem to have it. Yeah. Me and my friend here, we have a mutual friend who has autism, and I wonder what his view on that would be, because I know that he has said that some people play up something that they don't have. Zach, sorry, had a phone call. No problem. Drugs, yes, quite illegal here in the US for the most part. Do I worry about it? I'm cautious, but the experience is, in my opinion, worth the risk. What state are you in, Zach? Just out of interest, because I'd imagine some states are stricter than others. Your friend got ADHD completely wrong. Okay, hear that, Chris? Attention deficit. Is that what you said? It means you have a bad attention span. Okay,
No, no, it means that you demand attention.
Chris, feel free to join the chat. My friend's a bit shy. He likely declined. Is Chris the guy who phones you sometimes when you're making videos? Yes, he is. Always makes me chuckle when that happens. Zakar, I enjoy the uh, quasi numinous experience. I personally am an atheist, but I used to seek supernatural experience that spirituality supposedly offered. Alon Kilchi, welcome. What are your thoughts on Afghanistan and NATO pullout? That's certainly a big issue. Yeah, it's a very difficult one. That Zakar, have you ever had a religious ecstatic experience? No, not in that way. I haven't. I have been a practicing Christian before, but I've never had a profound experience in that sense. I'll address Alon's point. Yeah, it's very difficult to know, to be honest, because I understand Biden's rationale and certainly the sentimentality of pulling out on September 11th. It's been a massively costly conflict. I mean, I think after World War II, the costliest conflict in American history. not just in money, in lives. Thousands of Americans and coalition troops, 456 personnel from my country, um, and of course in Afghan lives, there's different figures, but they tend to be around the 150,000 mark. I can't remember if I made a video on this. I will make a video specifically on this issue. But the point I always stress is this is not a war that began in 2001. What began in 2001 is the American phase of the war. Truth is, Afghanistan's been a troubled land for the last 40 years. Um, and I think there's problems with pulling out and with staying. Pulling out obviously leaves the Afghans to the mercy of the Taliban, and it looks like they're making big advantages now. They're moving on Kabul, but I heard there was one American base that they pulled out and they didn't even tell the Afghan commander, which seems a bit unprofessional, or I don't know. But the other side of it is, one of the biggest criticisms of Bush and Blair was that this is a never-ending war and it was never going to be won. It's a very difficult situation because if there's some sort of peace negotiation, let's say between the Taliban and the Afghan government, inevitably that would mean some form of power sharing. And that then means Afghan women's rights are going to be laid back on, not to mention general human rights. One thing about the last 20 years, it's been very, very difficult. I wouldn't totally write it off as a disaster because there has been things that have happened that were not possible under the Taliban. Women can stand for parliament. Girls can go to school. This is not to say that that's not severely challenged, but it's very difficult to know because there is a school of thought that the West made this intervention. It's our responsibility to fix the problem. On the other hand, one could argue, well, it's Afghanistan. It's the Afghans' responsibility ultimately. It's their country. But even if there was a peace settlement with the Taliban, there's still ISIS, and the Taliban and other Islamist groups certainly don't see eye to eye. So I think whatever happens, it's unfortunate that the war is going to continue. It's a totally tragic land. I mean, it's difficult to see any optimism for that country. It's a land where empires died. But as for the 2001 intervention, personally, I think it's very different from Iraq. People make this argument Iraq and Afghanistan make it the same thing. Afghanistan, we had a situation where the Taliban was directly providing safe haven for Al Qaeda. With Iraq, there was no link between 9/11 and Saddam. And the late Donald Rumsfeld and other hawks in the Bush administration made that case. But I do think there's a big difference between Iraq and Afghanistan, and people talk about them like it's the same thing. I don't agree that it is. I do believe the 2001 intervention was justified. It had broadly international support, and people forget this. It was broad international UN approval of intervention in Afghanistan at that time. And it's easy to forget just how awful that period, 1996 to 2001, was. I mean, this was the end of the 20th century, and it was like the Dark Ages. So, if the Taliban got into power again, they could promise to respect women's rights. But so honestly, I don't know about that. I might make a video specifically on that, but it's a good question. Declan, yeah, that's true. You could get copyrighted. Heard people talking of using the ivermectin. I'm not familiar with that one to treat COVID too. In my church, we believe in miracles and healing, hope we see as well as God. Well, with all due respect, Declan, I don't believe prayer alone is enough. I think you need science. Science saves lives, and whilst the power of prayer is very important, I think that without vaccines, without drugs, without medicine, you're going to have not just with the pandemic, but in general. I mean, I'll give Mother Teresa as an example. A controversial side of Mother Teresa was that her refuges, her homes, she kind of had a philosophy of if they're meant to die, they're meant to die, and we'll give them religious comfort in the end. But apparently, she refused drugs coming into her homes. Like it was kind of the fate of the poor. Now that's pretty controversial, and I would say definitely is a side of religion that I don't like. Just stubbornly denying science in that way. And I'm not disparaging faith and prayer, but I think it's both. Um, Alon Kilchi, there was a great BBC Hard Talk episode on the Afghan pullout. I missed that one, but I think there's going to be a lot of coverage of this. I think there'll be other material to look at. I feel really bad for Afghanistan. It's a country I feel sympathy for. Been through hell since the late 70s. Absolutely. I mean, since the Tsar Revolution in 77, 78, that country's had nothing but trouble. I mean, the Soviet invasion, and this is why I feel resentful about RT and Moscow trying to feel moral supremacy to the West. I mean, they had 10 years. It was called their Vietnam. A lot of Soviet troops were killed. But you had Soviet soldiers urinating in mosques, disrespecting the local population. It naturally made the Afghans hateful of outsiders. I don't know if anyone's seen the film The Kite Runner. It's on a best-selling book. It shows a scene where the main protagonist, the Afghan guy, comes to it's either Canada or the United States as a refugee after the revolution, the Tsar Revolution in 77, 78, and he becomes a refugee because of the Soviet War. And his father is very much a modern man in the sense of knowing that the religious hardliners were a problem, and he also is contempt has a lot of contempt for the Russians. So there's a scene where he's being treated. Like this guy was quite a well off businessman, and basically he's being reduced to being like a much lower kind of station in life, where he's a car mechanic or something like that. But anyway, he has a heart attack, and he's treated by a Russian doctor, or rather, he's sort of asking the guy, "Where are you from?" That's an interesting accent. And when the guy goes, "Oh, I'm Russian," he immediately pushes him off and storms out of the surgery. It's an interesting scene. It just shows that there's a lot of bitterness and anger still. If you get a chance to check out the film The Kite Runner, it's a like it would take a while to explain the whole story, but kite flying is a big hobby in Afghanistan, so it's a very good film. I'd recommend it. But there's one scene where it shows a woman being basically stoned to death by the Taliban, and also the main protagonist has to wear a moustache and a beard, false beard when he goes back, so the morality police don't get him. It's a very good film. It really shows just how brutal the Taliban was and is. I mean, let's not forget earlier this year, it may not have been the Taliban, it may have been another Islamist group, but 80 schoolgirls slaughtered in a bombing got very little attention. Um, Alistair, so yeah, to answer your point, Alan, I also feel very sorry for that country. It's very difficult to know I mean, when we talk about nation building, this never happens overnight. And a country like Afghanistan, I believe that the core issue is religious dogmatism. As long as that's there, Afghanistan's going to be backward, unfortunately, a bit like part of rural Pakistan. Alistair Burns, have you heard of Havana syndrome? It's a mystery illness that has affected 200 different US diplomatic personnel across the globe. Yeah, apparently it's some sort of cyber warfare where various agents have been blamed, the Russians, the Cubans. It sounds like quite a covert sort of operation. I don't know if you guys have followed the story in Haiti recently, the assassination of President Moise. That's turning into a very mysterious thing because apparently 42 people have been arrested, and most of them are Colombians, and two were Haitian Americans. So this Colombian connection, I don't know if Colombia's tried to have some sort of covert operation, although President Duque of Colombia has condemned the assassination. The thing with Haiti, I mean, Moise was no angel. He was quite corrupt. But when you have a country that's already politically unstable, high crime rates, corruption, desperately poor, you have their head of state is assassinated. I'm quite concerned about Haiti. I think this is a country that's definitely on a tinderbox right now. I agree, Nathan. I follow science. I don't rely completely on my faith. So much has to be done ourselves to bring change and also prevent things like um, a pandemic on the scale happening again. Remember what we thought of it back in January last year when it started in China? At that time, I never thought it would come to these lockdowns. I knew it was going to spread, though. Yeah, I do remember late 2019, early 2020. It was like the third, fourth, fifth story in the news. It was like just a background story. And look what's happened. It's changed the world, finally. Okay, guys, I'm going to round this up if you don't mind. I'll give 5 more minutes. So let's have a few more questions, then I will have to round it up. It's been a pretty good session, though. It's been plenty of interaction. Carl, I'm an atheist, and I think that religious conflicts like the one here in Northern Ireland is ridiculous. I know it's about identity, and I think religion had an important role in it. Of course, today is the 12th. Has there been any trouble today, Carl? My cousin's from that very Protestant unionist background, and I know he's quite into that. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate that. Um, yeah, I agree, Carl. I mean, religion does cause enormous problems. I would just make one point, though. I've heard Tommy atheists, and I'm not suggesting yourself, but I've heard Tommy atheists saying if there's no religion in the world, there's no problems. That's clearly not true because without organized religion, we would still have crime, we would still have drug abuse. No offense, Sakar. We would still have exploitation. We would still have a lot of human problems. We'd have pollution. We would still have a lot of human problems. And whilst many of today's conflicts are caused by religion, there's others that aren't. A lot of today's wars are also over natural resources. What's my thoughts on Bellingcat? For those who don't know, this is an investigative journalist outlet. I'm quite intrigued by them. And I think we're effectively in, if not a new Cold War, certainly something very close to it. And, I'm clearly in a certain camp, which is the West. So anything that counters Russian propaganda, I'm all for. But more importantly, Bellingcat, as I understand it, is very important for investigative journalism. Particularly supporting I forget the guy's name, but that journalist who's being held in Belarus right now. When's the next live stream? I won't say a time right now because my schedule is very busy these days, so I don't want to sort of give an exact time. When I do live streams, I'll make a sort of a video in advance, like I've done this time. I can't say off the top of my head, to be honest. I need to check my schedule, but it will be relatively soon. Not sure how economy going to recover. I think it will take some time. Yeah, I mean, it's strange because we heard about the COVID recession, but that seems to have kind of, I wouldn't say sorted out. I'm not an economist, but I don't know though. We are having problems in the UK. The number of high street stores that are closing, Debenhams, Gap, apparently Gap UK is now closed. So there are some concerning things. I live in the Midwest of the United States, a little farmer state called Indiana, and you're taking LSD. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but Indiana is a pretty conservative state, isn't it? In Mike Pence's home state. So just be careful, buddy. I mean, I know in the States, drug use is a custodial sentence, which I disagree with. I don't think, for example, what you're doing, I don't think you should go to prison. But seriously, be careful. Otherwise, you'll end up with hardened gang members. And yeah, seriously, I would be cautious. Um, are you in Indianapolis or Plainfield or trying to get my geography in line? Is Gary Indiana or is that Illinois? I think it's a Chicago suburb. I think Gary and Hammond are in Indiana, aren't they? Carl McGee, there has been no problem here on the 12th. That's good to know because certainly earlier this year there was lots of nonsense. Once again, put Ulster into a bad light. Okay, guys, I'm going to round this up if you don't mind. Because my friends waiting patiently. So I'm going to round this up. I think it's been a good session. And I won't name a date for the next one just yet. But as always, we've covered a lot. So thanks a lot. So have a good evening, everyone, or day or night, depending where you are. And thanks a lot. Take care, guys. You sound like you've been on Jetpunk. Is that for Zach, Alistair? Never heard of that one. Personally, don't do drugs, kids. Drugs are bad. Stay away. No, but seriously, I would be very careful about putting chemicals in my body because you're risking a lot. Okay, people, take care and see you next time.